Hi, my name is Mark Malkai. I'm going to teach you about digital communication and virtual teamwork. I want you to imagine that you're in a cabin in the middle of Mississippi. You and your family are cuddled around a radio, and the only source of technology or entertainment is the single man on the other end talking and telling you a story. This is all that was available back in the day. In the olden days, there were two types of technology. One being public broadcast in the form of newspapers, television, and radio. The other being private communication, being telephone. With the newspaper, you had very limited resources and it was only delivered to your house once a day. So the information that you were getting and receiving was very, very limited and there wasn't much of it. Television, that was basically plays just automated on black and white screens. And the radio was exactly like I described, very plain, and not much information there. Private communications and telephone, when developed, Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison made the first telephone, and it wasn't very practical. There was a lot of party lines, and a party line is where you, and it could be several neighbors, would share the exact same phone line, and if you picked up your phone and your neighbor was on it talking to their parents or their aunt, you had to hang up and keep checking until they were done. So these forms of communication have obviously came a long ways into the form of current technology. In current technology, public and private media started to change due to the internet. The internet is responsible for almost all of technology change in social media and technology. Examples include Facebook, mass emailing, blogging, Skype, etc., etc. There are several things in Facebook, just in the recent months that I've noticed on my own feed that technology has greatly improved, making it much more usable for the consumer and much more practical for people to view images, stories, pictures, things like that. On our next slide, I have a graph, and from the sources that I found, this slide is social media platforms from ages 11 to 18. This on this side of the graph, if you can see it, is the percentage of people using social media. Now I want you to follow this line right here. This particular line is Facebook. If you notice, younger kids start out 11 years old using Facebook. If you follow this line, 18 years old, nearly 100% of people use technology in some form. That's big. This study was based on 2,496 students. That's a big number. Virtual teamwork. Virtual teamwork is really has been growing over the past 10 years, over the last decade. And what virtual teamwork is say a corporation of 20 employees. They spread out all over the world. They do different things for this company. At one time, at one point in time, at any part in the day, they can get together on their computers and they can see one another. And at that moment, they can communicate and bounce ideas off one another. Whereas 20 years ago or 30 years ago, the only way to do that was through letters and things like that. Virtual teamwork affects people on many levels. And what I mean by that is even students working on team projects may also need to meet online. Isn't that ironic? Most business no longer occurs face to face. And that's totally true. There's most businesses, it's inconvenient for people to meet face to face because of how fast life has gotten and how fast the world works. So it's so much easier for businesses and communities and even people to either Skype or even text. It's much faster than calling. You can just say, "Hey, how are you?" in opposed to calling, maybe interrupting something that they have going. So business has definitely changed. I want to incorporate how technology has affected me at my company. My company has taken all of these advancements to technology and apply them in its own manner, in the form of Ethernet and PLC technology. Ethernet is an internet at a centralized location. Internet is for the consumer, Ethernet is for a very centralized plant, let's say. And they use Ethernet and PLC logic to make machines talk to one another. And this differs from technology 50 years ago, where everything was pen and paper, and you couldn't diagnose anything unless you went out and troubleshot for hours and hours on end. Now everything is now labeled with an IP address. An IP address is a specific number that a piece of equipment has, down to micro switches. And it'll show up on a computer and you can diagnose it immediately. You can fix problems in nanoseconds opposed to hours. And technology is rapidly changing so quickly that us as technicians, we have to go back to school every 2 to 3 years, otherwise technology will take over and we won't be able to help. The Unified Communications and Collaboration. This organization was built in General Motors. It was built in 2015, and there was a study that looked how effective it was and compared to their old methods, and the study showed to be very, very successful. And what this is basically is an implementation of a program that accepts all sorts of social media, all sorts of media, so that being emails, texts, blogging, things like that, from any level of employee. So you could be a CEO or you could be a line worker to a janitor. Everyone can communicate through this one single program. This is huge. This is huge technology, and this is going everywhere. Every single company will have this in the next 5 to 10 years. The conclusion to all this, let's summarize. The summary of everything is technology is going to be here regardless of what you want. Are you going to be ready for it? I will.